the lands upon which we all gather via the wonders of technology tonight. On behalf of all of us, I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary, and I'm sorry for that little intercession of technology recording. But thank you all again. I'm just going to share screen with you now. Like we said, we're here for the Getting Ready for School webinar, so thank you for being here. Tonight's webinar is recorded, and I just wanted to bring to your attention that if you have any technical issues or problems with sounding, with volume, anything like that, please use the chat and that will be monitored throughout the evening. If you have any questions for the presenters, please use the Q&A. So what we will be doing is the presenters will check your questions throughout the night as they get an opportunity, and they will be answering those questions as the evening proceeds. If we don't answer all your questions during the session, there will be a question and answer opportunity as well at the end of the evening. If again, your question is still not answered, we will certainly follow it up at the end of the webinar, after the webinar, further on in the next week or two. So please use the function Q&A to put any questions that you would like throughout the evening so that we can address that as we go. There will be 2 polls run tonight. It's the same question. It will be run at the beginning of the evening, and the same question will be run again at the end of the evening that we would really like you to answer so that we can see how the evening has gone in terms of questions you might have had. But we will also have a feedback survey. But the survey is more about your feedback and us informing our future practices as what we can improve in, was the content relevant, and a few other questions like that, so that we make sure what we're delivering is what you're needing and you're wanting. So Rosemary, I'll ask you to run the first poll, please. So you should be able to see that question now. Great. Responses are coming in quickly. Wonderful. So as we can see, majority of people are feeling somewhat confident. We've got quite a few still not yet confident, and we've got a few who are confident and who aren't quite sure. So we hope to see that increase by the end of the evening. Thank you very much for taking the time to answer that question. That same question will be run again at the end of the evening, as will a feedback survey. So thank you. So the purpose of this evening's session is for participants, or for yourselves, or the family, to gain an understanding of ways on how to help your child transition to school. Also to receive up-to-date advice and guidelines from the school systems that are here this evening to support you and your children in this transition to school, and to know that supports are available and how to access these supports. One of the key things that we really promote at Early Ed, and you will probably hear more about that this evening, is the idea of the team around the child. And this image very much shows that your child is central. Closest to that child are you, the family, in knowing your child and what to share, but it also takes input from the community. So that could be extended family, it could be community networks, and then your key worker team and your early intervention team in the green. So that is your speech therapists, special educators, occupational therapists, etc., any intervention workers. And it really does take input from this whole team working together to build your child and support you and your child in this transition process. And that's something that we really want to promote throughout the evening as well. Using the team around the child, even if it's just you that is that team, aims for the child to be ready. What makes a child ready? For the family to be ready, for the early childhood service, if they're currently in a preschool, long daycare or family daycare, to be ready on what information to be passing on, how to be currently helping the child. The ready community, so all those supports that we spoke about, whether it be extended family, intervention workers, health workers, to be supporting you and your child to be ready. And for the school to be ready with what information they are going to be sharing and expecting and what they can do before your child starts. So again, it takes the whole team and everybody to be ready for your child to be ready. But tonight we will guide you on what that means to be ready. We would just like to share some of the links for additional resources. Raising Children Network has fabulous information on a range of topics, but especially in relation to school readiness. There is an area dedicated for that as well. The Reimagine Australia website used to be known as Early Childhood Intervention Australia. They have had a name change to Reimagine Australia, and they have fabulous resources on transitions to school as well. They have resources dedicated to the family, to interventionists or current support workers, and resources available for school teachers as well. So that's another website that would be a great resource for you to have. The Inclusion Project is about promoting awareness of inclusion in school systems. Early Childhood Australia blog also has some transition to school resources, and Early Ed itself has a Learning Together webpage that was funded by Multicultural New South Wales project, which has tip sheets, videos, and they're all translated as well in community languages to support you in the transition to school process. Ask for help if you are concerned. Never be afraid to ask. No question is a silly question, and people are often willing to listen and guide. So how and where to access local supports? There is a range of supports available to you, and it could be through your child's early childhood centre, so the long daycare or preschool if they attend one, or a family daycare. Your child may be part of the ECEI, the Early Childhood Early Intervention Pathway of the NDIS program, and there is a link there as well. The community health services. So even if your child is 3, 4, 5 years old, you still can be accessing your local community health nurses, still taking blue books to the health nurses to get developmental checks along the way. That doesn't need to end when children are young. That can certainly still be continuing in these ages as well. There are some local Start Strong funded services, and we can share Early Ed Start Strong services with you a bit further on in a few more slides, and they help with transitioning children to school, but also accessing early childhood services and with educational play programs as well. And your local school is also a support available to you for further information. Okay, so this is the Early Ed Start Strong page. Start Strong is a program that is funded through the Department of Education, and the goal is to support children in accessing early childhood services to help them be ready for school. So that support might be helping you find services that are appropriate, helping you enroll into these services before your child starts school. Or you might have a child who has already started but isn't quite settling in. Through our Start Strong funding, we can support you with that as well. So one of the areas is about helping children and families access these services before starting school. And that's part of the being ready for school. The other thing through Start Strong, the other support is by providing you with play-based educational learning experiences. How do we do that? Further on the page, our Early Ed Start Strong page, you will see some buttons, and if you click on each of those buttons, it will take you to extra programs that are free for you if that's something that you are eligible for and you're interested in. Please email Early Ed through the Early Ed through services@earlyed.com.au. Rosemary will be putting that in the chat throughout the night. Learn to play, play to learn. That's about providing families with low-cost, no-cost activities that can be done at home as a means of using play to learn. Active play, active learning is the same concept, but it's using the outdoor environment and playing with the outdoor environment as a means of learning. We also have the My Time playgroups, which is a playgroup available to parents of children with disabilities. It's also a support group. So not only are children there to play and learn, but parents are supported with qualified professionals to go through any topics of concerns that are relevant to you. We also have the Ready to Learn through Storytime, which is about using literacy and in helping families and children engage with books as a means of learning. Our Cubby House is a library that families can access either online or in person, and that's based at Forestville. Throughout the year, we do promote some pop-up sessions, which are one-off short sessions on certain relevant topics in relation to preparing children for their transition to school. And then every week we do have online interactive story time. So you are more than welcome to seek registration by clicking on that link. It will take you further to the information that you need. So now I get to introduce our wonderful speakers to you, and they will take that further, but I will stop sharing so that you can see everybody. To start with, Alma George is from the Catholic Education Diocese of Parramatta. Thank you for joining us tonight, Alma.
Thank you, Belinda.
Thank you. And we also have from the Department of Education, Coralie Pratt and Katrina Ross. Thank you both for joining. And then we also do have from the Australian Independent School System, Sue Cairns.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here.
So I really want to thank the presenters for being here this evening and volunteering their services to share this really valuable information. And I will bring up our first speaker's slides for tonight, who is Alma. Please bear with me.
Okay.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry, I've just got to, okay. Although we're meeting virtually, we continue to acknowledge the traditional custodians that have for thousands of years walked upon and cared for the lands upon which we are all individually located. We acknowledge the continued deep spiritual attachment and relationship of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to this country and commit ourselves to the ongoing journey of reconciliation. Now, this evening, the piece that I'm going to address is really getting your child ready for school. I'm representing Catholic education and I'm from the Diocese of Parramatta. Now, there are 11 dioceses in New South Wales, but we're the one that occupies most of Western Sydney. So Catholic Schools New South Wales is the governing body that supports us in our work each day. So if you were to go to their website, you'd be able to find a school across New South Wales. There's a lovely little search bar that you can put in your location, and it'll help you find the schools that are closest to you. It's quite easy to use this site, so please don't hesitate to do that. Now, within the site too, there is the Early Years Foundations for Learning part. And that's a really important site for educators and for families. And it supports the collaboration of the two in moving forward in preparing your child for school in Catholic education. So for most people, you've already made a decision about where your child is going to go. And we encourage you very strongly to find out what programs are available to support your child in their transition to school. A lot of our schools go to great lengths to ensure the inclusion of children and helping them get ready. So these programs are sometimes personalised for children who experience, challenges with separation or find it really difficult in environments that they're not used to. So we do encourage you to contact your school and find out what things are available, what things are already in place, and what things could be made possible for your child. Always talk about your child's needs in particular. Don't try to fit into the box. If you feel that there are special things that you need and your child needs, please make sure that you talk about those things. It's really important too that in getting ready, it's also parents getting ready. Running a family is a really big job, and having to drop children off at school every day or organise for them to be collected or use public transport or whatever it is really important. So becoming familiar with where your school is located and what services and provisions are around your school is also a really important thing for you to think about. And we talk about preparing children. It takes months to prepare a child for something that's going to be one of the biggest changes for them in their little lives. They're going to be amongst hundreds, sometimes even more, other people in a school, and sharing a space and sharing a room and sharing bathrooms and canteens and all that can be quite daunting for our little ones. So it's really important that you engage in those meaningful conversations about what to expect when they are going to be commencing school. And this evening I was asked particularly to talk about the importance of play. And I think sometimes we know that it's important, but we don't consider how it plays a really significant role on a child's development, and particularly their language development. And the research tells us very clearly children who engage in meaningful oral language are children who learn to read and learn to write, with greater ease than those who don't have the same exposure. So it's really important that through play, we are explicitly and deliberately developing our child's language skills. We want them to tune into the sounds of the language that we use. And for some of our children, they're using other languages. So it's important for them to be hearing really good language models, and for you to be rehearsing with them the appropriate language that's going to help them engage in really great relationships when they're at school. The socially appropriate language that we as humans need in order for us to connect with each other. The other thing about play is that it helps children around their social and emotional development and regulating that. So through connections with others, through engagement with others, through play, children learn to regulate. And when they're dysregulated, we help build their capacity around how to resolve that and how to come into a socially appropriate situation. Through play, we develop creativity, we develop resilience. Children who play well usually do really well in all situations and are able to solve problems because they're able to work through and talk through and express themselves. And even children who are non-verbal, if we give them the means to be able to communicate, that also aids them in their ability to collaborate and to be members of a team in a game or something else on the playground. Now, through play, we always say, it promotes activity and develops, children's confidence in the skills that they're developing. So as they're trialing how their body works and, through trial and error, developing skill, we're also developing the mind to bring them along and making them ready for learning. One of the things we do very deliberately in a lot of our schools is we've got movement breaks. So making sure that there are opportunities in the day where children are actually active, but it's not just active for active's sake. It's about learning to be a member of a team through play and through movement, collaborating and being able to solve problems and do things together with others. Now, there are probably a lot of things that you do around the house that are going to get your child ready for school, things that will develop their fine motor, their gross motor skills. And I suppose what we encourage is that you have a mindfulness around that you are explicit and deliberate in the things that you set up for your child, knowing that it's going to aid them in their capacity to be able to participate at school. Now, and the things that you could be doing are not things like sitting down and learning the alphabet. It's great to learn those things, and there's lots of time where children will develop those skills, but it could be through just the day-to-day activities that you're doing. I know one of the things my children used to love is when we were baking cookies, because, good old Play-Doh is great, but it's even better when you're doing all those, using all those skills to actually get something out of it at the end. So, and that contributes to their physical as well as their social and emotional development. Playing games is a really important thing, because things like turn taking, children we need to explicitly teach them how to do that. We need to teach them that it's okay not to always win, that it's okay that, things don't always go according to plan. So through structured activities like that and through engagement with others, other children, other adults, children will develop those skills. One of the really lovely things about play is that it can happen anywhere, and developing skills can happen anywhere. Now, I don't know about you, but when I had little ones sitting in the kitchen with me, it was the pantry. The bottom shelves of the pantry is where they learnt to count and where they learnt to group objects and talk about, number. They were counting, they were organising, they were developing skills that, whether it was intentional or unintentional, they were skills that were really helpful in their ability to perform at school. Things like painting and drawing and, the pretend tea party out in the garden, or, sitting next to you when you're having a cup of tea with your friends. It's really important that we're very deliberate around how we bring children into these social situations, because it is the social skills development that's going to help them build those lovely relationships when they start school. Oops, sorry. My fingers are a bit slippery. Now, schools are places where, structures and bells and routines are really, really important. So it's really important for children to know and understand that. For a lot of children, it could be something quite difficult, to have to stop what you're doing because you've got to move on to the next task or be in the next room or things like that. So helping your children around, routines, understanding routines and why we move from one thing to the next is really, really important. So, not just around the days of the week, but also transitions from one activity to the next. Providing them with, opportunities to learn that you can't always, it's not just about how long you want to engage in an activity, that there are things that are governed by the time and the needs of others. We really encourage the use of visuals or photos to help your children understand these concepts. So things like photos of their routine, what their routine looks like at home, getting ready for whatever the day is going to bring. So having photos of, the morning part of the day, the middle part of the day and the afternoon is really helpful for children to understand and to be able to predict what their day is going to look like. The other thing that could be lots of fun is creating those learning stories and helping, develop behaviours that will assist children in being successful at school. So a learning story could be around what we need to do when we go to the supermarket, or what we need to do, because we are going to be starting school. So what are the things, the routines that you can put in place and help teach your child about what they need to do to get ready. Communication is probably one of the most important things that, sometimes we know the routines and we know what should be happening, but we're not explicit and we don't verbalise those things for our children. So it's really important, think aloud strategies are great, where, you're actually helping them move through the next part of whatever it is that you're doing. And really importantly, to let them know when there are changes. If dad's not going to pick them up today, it's going to be grandma. They need to know that. So making sure that we always communicate the variations. Now, it could be something really simple, like they always have a Vegemite sandwich on white bread, and that morning didn't have Vegemite. And they open their lunchbox and they haven't got Vegemite. It's really important for them to have known that they weren't going to get Vegemite that morning. And I know that sounds like a really simple thing, but for some children, that is a really important part of their day, the routine around what they're going to eat. It's also really important for children to have routines around their day. So specific times around waking up and going to bed. Those routines are really important because schools operate like that as well. There are different things happening at particular times. So, you know, tuning into that concept of time is really important. You know, we've added reading in there. I think reading, everybody knows how valuable it is, but also taking children into worlds that they otherwise couldn't imagine. And I know that technology plays a really big part in our, you know, in our lives at the moment, but it's really important to continue to share stories with children, and modelling that for them is a really beautiful way to get them ready for school and for learning to read and reading to learn, which, you know, children sometimes do struggle with. Other really important pieces are around making sure that your child is as independent as they can be. Sometimes children are ready for these bits and sometimes they're not. And that's why I say as ready as they can be, because children learn these things at a different rate and pace. But it's really important that there are rehearsals around the uniform, that they do know how to dress themselves. If their shoes come off, they do know how to put their shoes on. And where they don't, being able to ask for help. But all that does take rehearsal. So it's really important that we're explicit in how we prepare children for the school day. The other things that may be really helpful if your children aren't already doing them, and that is, you know, washing and drying hands and not leaving the water running, things like that. Being able to look after themselves. And if they're not able to, being able to ask for help. You know, it's really important that when children can't do things for themselves, that they're able to seek assistance to get the help that they need to complete whatever task it is that they're doing. One of the biggest things about schools is the lunchbox, and, you know, anyone that's been out on the playground when all the little ones are out, you're moving from one child to another trying to help them. That Glad wrap really doesn't work, does it? It's always hard finding that little bit that you peel away. But look, rehearsal is really important, and, you know, taking opportunities when you're taking them out to use the lunchbox, to know how to unwrap food, to be able to do those things for themselves. Even packing the lunchbox and having a picnic out in the backyard where you can actually sit next to your child and see how they're managing. You know, that could be a really good way for you to work out what support they need and what assistance that they will require when they're at school trying to do those things for themselves. The other bit in this, and I know there's lots of bits, is that, you know, the whole notion of we're members of a community. So there are rules and there are expectations, and helping children to understand why they have to follow those rules and those expectations. Because, you know, sometimes we tell children what to do, but we don't explain why. And, you know, when they're in a class of how many children, it's important that they know and understand that they're a member of that group, and that when directions and instructions are given, that they're actually expected to follow them. Things like, you know, if a teacher directs them to a particular place, to understand that it's important that they follow that direction. And also the stuff around turn taking, and, you know, I've mentioned this a few times, but it's really important that when children can't do things or don't understand things, that we give them the words and the skill and the rehearsal to be able to seek assistance when they need it. I'm really sorry. Oops. You know, one of the things that children find really hard is when they just have to do what everybody else is doing. So the more we talk and give children opportunities to rehearse those things, the better it becomes when they go to school. So I know story time at the library is a lovely way for children to, understand that everybody's sitting and listening together. So finding those opportunities, those social connections that children can rehearse some of the things that are expectations at school. And, not every child goes to school knowing how to write their name, but it is important for them to be able to identify their name, because we send them to school with, everything's labelled. And so, there's an assumption that they're going to be able to work out which bag is theirs when there's 30 bags that all look the same, or there are 6 green water bottles on the bench. So it is important that they're able to, even if they can't write it, but to be able to recognise their name, because that's how they identify their belongings. And that's a really important thing. Now, packing bags, and look, I was terrible at this because I think I packed my kids' bags for the first year of school. And I know better now, but I didn't know that back then. But it's really important for them to develop that skill, to be able to organise their things and to see how how it all fits into that bag. It's that really important skill to be able to organise themselves and their belongings. Carrying their own bag. I know some of the little ones really struggle with those great big bags with the lunchbox and the water bottle and everything else, but it is important for them to be able to manage that and allow your child to do that. When they're packing their bag, watch, and if they need help, they'll ask you for it, but allow them the trial and error and, experimenting with it and seeing how everything can fit together. And being able to identify their own things and taking responsibility for them is a really important skill that we need to ensure that our children have. It's that whole notion of bringing each child to their level of independence. And in a classroom, that is really important. Now, I'm not sure if Belinda, are questions just going to go into the chat? Is that?
There are questions in the Q&A, and there's one question that might be directed to you, Alma. It's, is St. Joseph in Schofields part of your organisation?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay, lovely. There is another question that I thought maybe we could leave to the end of the evening, because if it's not brought up by the presenters, we could address it later, but it's in regards to the resilience, which is a really worthwhile, important topic, and you're welcome to the St. Schofields question, St. Joseph's question. So that's all that is in the chat.
I'm just
Alma.
Sure.
Yeah. So thank you very much for presenting that. If any of the attendees do have questions that you think of, please feel free to add them, and we will keep checking those questions throughout the night. Next, we do have Department of Education. So that will be Coralie and Katrina. So I'll share your slides now. Sorry, it wasn't Alma's that I was sharing. I will share your slides and you can introduce yourselves. So thank you.
Can't see it yet, Belinda. Oh, there we go.
Belinda, just go to slideshow at the top.
To the right.
Yeah.
Top right, in the middle.
Yeah.
In the red part.
Yeah, in the
red part.
Slideshow. No, lower. Or start from beginning. That will work too. That's the one.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Good evening, everybody. Coralie and I are going to be doing, taking it in turns to do the transition to school. I'm a Learning and Wellbeing Officer and formerly a teacher.
I'm a transition support teacher, early intervention.
So we can have the next slide, please. So planning for starting school. Where do we start? A lot of parents come and ask this question. So you can start in term 2 in April, in the year prior to your child starting school. Don't panic if they're starting next year and you haven't done it yet. Just get that process started now. You would like to identify your local school. You can do that through the online program of the New South Wales Public School Finder. And then you can contact your principal and arrange to meet. And then you will complete the enrolment application. So children can start kindergarten at the beginning of the school year if they turn 5 on or before the 31st of July that year. And legislation states that all children must be attending school by their 6th birthday. There are a few exemptions that can take place if your child has a disability or if their birthday is after the 1st of October when they turn 6. But a special exemption needs to be applied for, and that can be done through the school, your local school. If you want an out-of-area enrolment, you can do that request through the local school. However, schools are required to set an enrolment number to cater for anticipated local demand. So if the local enrolment exceeds the number of places available, then an out-of-enrolment would not be available to you. But that's always something that you would speak to the principal at your local school. And all teachers are trained to work with your child regardless of their ability. So they do quality differentiated teaching. So they cover all their ages and levels of development. And the school is always your first contact for any options and questions that you may have. And if your child does have a disability or certain additional support needs, then it's really good to have all those reports and assessments handy to give to the school so they can be ready, the learning support team can be ready to be able to support your child when they start school. Okay, next slide, please. So there's an enrolment application to fill out, and all parents and carers need to complete the standard enrolment application when you're applying for a Department of Education school. There's lots of important information that you need to include on the form. And if there are any things like behaviour plans or the assessments and reports, as I mentioned earlier, emergency response plans or anaphylaxis, and any adjustments that are made prior to the school programs potentially that they have in preschool, then those are the things that you might also want to include as well. And next slide, please. And Coralie can speak.
Hi. We know that strong relationships and information sharing between families, early childhood services and schools help support a positive transition to school for your child. This transition to school statement, which was introduced in, I think it was 2014, is a very simple way of sharing information about children with their school. It enables, first of all, early childhood educators to list some of the interests particular individual children have, any needs they have and how they handle those needs, the way children learn best. There's a space for families to complete any details they want the school to know, their expectations for their children when they get to school, interests that they think the children that should be included in the information, and strategies to support their learning. And there's a consent for information to be passed to the primary school. That document is on the DET website. It can be downloaded as a PDF or it can be filled in online as a digital statement. And I think most schools are really encouraging early childhood services to complete the transition to school statement so that they're ready for children from day one of the school year. Next slide, please. The department has a lot of information about transition to school on the website. And this is some of the information that the department provides. It suggests that you contact your local principal and find out what's happening at your school. Many schools have a lot of information about starting kindergarten, orientation sessions, perhaps some little videos made up by the older children that are on the school's website. So you don't always have to contact the principal. There is a lot of information on the school website. All schools have orientation sessions, some more than others. Some have 3, 4, in term 4. Some are starting to have their orientation sessions now. A lot of schools have commercial information booklets that are given out at orientation that outline what the uniform looks like, what is the school routine. There are school videos about a day in the life of a kindy student. And they suggest some transition tips as well, but I'm going to talk a bit more about that later. New slide, please. Some of these things are from the departmental website, and there's the internet address. There are some social story templates which are really good for children who are very anxious about going to school, or children with disability. They can, the parents can access the templates and they can compose a social story with photos, or you can approach the school and people like me can develop social stories for children. I take a lot of photos of schools and I put them together as a social story. The children can look at them online or print them out and have a look over the holidays so that they can, it's a story of what's going to happen to them. And there's quite, over the school holidays, it's quite a long time between when they may be finishing preschool or their early childhood program and starting school. So social stories can sort of remind them of what's going to happen and familiarise them with some of the aspects of school life. There's a very cute little story about a koala going to school called Daisy's First Day. It can be downloaded and printed, or you can have a look at it online as a video. The little girl down the bottom on the left is giving, describing her feelings, a little video describing her feelings about starting school. And children might enjoy that as well. And the middle picture is a template of a social story. Next slide, please. So there are some orientation tips. Some of them have been mentioned by Alma already. Walk or drive past the school during the weekend. Make sure your child can identify and open their lunchbox and drink bottle. Maybe they could make a list of all the things they'd like to be in their lunchbox. One thing to check about when the child goes to orientation, or you can call the school and ask, is how many containers you're going to need. Some schools may have fruit break at a certain time and the children just need to bring a piece of fruit. They might need a small lunchbox, a small box for morning tea, and then a larger one for lunch. Most schools are very keen on minimum amount of wrappings, so a lunchbox is a really good thing to, or plastic box is a good thing to take to school. As Alma suggested, decide on drop-off and pick-up arrangements and discuss what children would do if they missed the bus, you were late, or they couldn't find you. Dress in the school uniform, especially putting on shoes and taking them off. That will happen a few times during the day. Take some photographs in the school uniform so that the children can share them with their grandparents and siblings and talk about starting school. And has been mentioned before, label everything. Lost property at school takes up quite a lot of time and space. I would suggest perhaps having a spare hat, because children can't play unless they have a hat.
I put the next one in, Coralie, didn't I?
Yes, no, I don't have boys.
This is one of the ones that is like a secret one that you don't think about when you've got boys, but they often don't do this at home. So they often either sit on the toilet or, you know, that in preschool, they also have a different process, but they'll have urinals at school. So it's good to be able to teach them how to do a standing up wee, and just having their shorts just slightly below their bottoms. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's one of those things that if the boys know how to do it, then they're good to go when they're in the toilets and no one will look at them strangely, the older kids. And it's just, you know, making sure that they're a big boy ready for school.
Thank you. I recently attended an orientation session for a little boy, and he found the cubicle quite challenging. He was a bit frightened of going in and perhaps being locked inside. So maybe practicing going into a cubicle and using the toilet and helping children to unlock and lock the cubicle. The other thing is a number of children may be frightened of the noise of hand dryers, and that's something that you can communicate to the school at orientation. Alma also suggested pretend play with a friend or a sibling of being in school, putting your hand up, asking questions, giving news, reading a book, or buying something from the canteen. Usually kindergarten children don't start using the canteen till term 2, but in some schools they do from the first day. The last one is a suggestion that was made by an early childhood teacher when I was visiting a childcare centre. She has a very anxious little boy, and she said she was going to give him a little pencil case containing perhaps 2 toy cars or a handball or some cards, like she suggested Pass the Pigs, that they could take into the playground so that they have something to do with another child. A lot of schools don't have a lot of equipment available. They might have a big playground, and it might be a bit daunting for little ones. Some schools, particularly in the first term, keep the kindies together for play in a smaller play area, and that enables them to get to know each other better and feel a bit more secure. Next slide, please. I'm a big one on visuals. This was part of a social story that I developed. Maybe get the children to list the things, draw pictures of the things that will go into their backpack, and maybe they could tick them off as they do it. School hat, fruit, morning tea, lunch, drink bottle, perhaps a raincoat, sunscreen probably, perhaps a library bag, and a smile. Next slide, please.
Coralie, I was just going to say that sometimes in the first few days, first few weeks, you might want to pack a spare pair of underpants. Just in case there's a little.
You did say that, yes. Most schools have lots of spare underpants. I've changed a few. So there's a lot of research on transition. One of the DPs at a school I visit actually did a PhD in America on transition. And that it's well established that a successful start to school is linked with later positive educational and social outcomes. And I guess that makes sense. So it's transition time actually is a time when relationships between families and the school develop. And it's a very hard thing to sort of hand your children over for the whole day to people you don't know very well. And developing a relationship of trust is really, really important. And the sorts of relationships that educators and families and children develop very early will carry them on through at least primary school and probably into high school as well. Next slide, please. And the concept of continuity of learning between early childhood experiences and kindergarten is one that is well accepted in DET schools. Early stage 1 teachers want to know what children like doing, their interests and their strengths and their needs. And they want to learn from early childhood teachers and early childhood centres what happens there, and try and not have such a huge gap between early childhood services and the first year of school. And that continuity of learning promotes a sense of security in children. These are familiar sort of activities as well. Next slide, please. So how do you say what is the core focus in kindergarten? From the department, during their primary school years, students will develop strong literacy and numeracy skills. And literacy and numeracy are a huge focus, particularly in the first part of kindergarten. Children explore new ideas, including the use of information and communication technologies. A lot of children will be familiar with technology already. And lessons are designed to respond to the needs, learning styles and rates of progress of individual students. So that the notion of children being ready for school in some ways is slightly out of date. For our schools, we want the schools to be ready for all children, regardless of their language needs, skills, strengths. Kindergarten teachers are ready for a huge range of children. They know that they're going to get children with a variety of personalities and needs. So in kindergarten, I get developing positive and trusting relationships with staff and peers is really important. Hopefully making some friends, practicing the social communication skills and problem solving skills through play-based learning in small pairs and groups. And that promotes the turn taking and the sharing and play-based learning as a partner with explicit teaching as well. Being part of a large group rather than a small group, identifying with a class and with a school, feeling a sense of belonging, becoming increasingly independent, separating from parents and carers, looking after their own belongings, as Alma said, get them to carry their own bag into school, unpack it, adapting to larger groups and noisier groups in the playground or at assembly, responding, listening, sitting and listening in group time to stories, participating in circle games, which they do at preschool, but the groups are much larger. So maybe they'll be waiting for their turn a bit longer. And of course, developing early literacy and numeracy concepts and fine motor skills, because they'll be starting to draw and colour fairly early. Feeling confident and competent is probably the most important element in kindergarten. And kindergarten teachers are there to help children design learning experiences that enable children to succeed. Don't forget, if you've got any questions about anything about your child's learning and development, don't hesitate to discuss it with teachers. If you have any concerns, don't let them fester. Teachers are very responsive to families' needs, and schools have different ways of parents communicating with teachers, and that will be outlined on orientation. Thank you.
Okay, the next slide's me. Very quickly going to say, Coralie, that most parents of kindies, they tend to form a little like WhatsApp group or a Facebook chat. And
they're already there.
Yes, I would encourage you to have lots of play dates with your child, with some of the other students at school as well, because that really helps them build the friendships in the playground as well, because they've got that experience outside of school as well. Okay, so I'm going to buzz on through this and be really quickly because I'm running out of time. But it's important to talk about the legislation that we have to be part of, and that we are in line with the legislation. So we've got an inclusive practice policy and also the disability strategy, where we ensure that all children are known, valued and cared for. We aspire to build an education system in which children with disability thrive academically, develop good physical, mental and emotional health, and gain the skills to live a fulfilling independent life post-school. And down the bottom there, you can see it's the building the friendships, interacting with other students and feeling that sense of belonging. And that kind of goes all the way through their school, and it starts in kindergarten. Okay, next slide, please. So to make sure that we are able to do all of this for your darling children, we have a delivery support team, and that has school and non-school based staff, and they work across a group of schools to provide support. So I'm a learning and wellbeing officer in that first list, but all these different people here support the schools to support your child with their learning. And if you do have a difficulty or if you've got concerns about your child's learning or development, then will you speak to the school in the first instance, and the department schools have all these people to access to help support your child's needs. So we've got assistant principals hearing and vision, so they obviously help students with sensory issues. Wonderful support teacher transitions, that'd be Coralie. We have behaviour specialist advisors and officers, so for the very tricky students that are finding school challenging and have very challenging behaviours. And assistant principals, APs, learning and support, they also go in and help the school, the teachers and the students with getting systems set up in place to help their learning. And Aboriginal community and student liaison officers and homeschool liaison officers, which we call HISLOs, and they help if there's a problem with attendance. Next slide, please. So this is part of, if you've got a child that has additional needs, your first stop shop would be your school, and within the school, the in-school programs, you have a learning and support teacher, and they have learning and support teams where your child, if they had the needs, would be referred there. The school counselling team is involved, and they have senior executive staff of the school that's also involved in that learning and support team. And then beyond that, if there's more support needed, we have specialist services and programs targeted for individual students. So one of them is IFS, Integration Funding Support. And that is additional funding to support students in schools, normally a school learning support officer or SLSO, and they can support students from kindergarten to year 12 enrolled in regular classes. And then if we need more than that again, we would have support classes. Or you can also have itinerant teachers, vision and hearing in your mainstream schools. They can also be applied for. And if you need additional support beyond your mainstream classroom, then you can apply through an access request for a support class in either a mainstream school or a special school. And there's a variety of those. Again, the school would be your first point of contact and they would help you. They would create the access request. You have input into that. And there are a variety of classes available for intellectual disabilities, hearing impairment, autism, behaviour. Next slide, please. The Best Start Assessment. So the Best Start Assessment is, don't panic about it, when your students, when your children start school, we need to have a baseline. The teachers need to have a baseline, as Coralie and Emma was saying. All the students start school at different levels. So it's not something you need to teach to, it's just something as a baseline so that the teaching staff can move from there and know what they do already know and what they need to learn. It's mandatory and one-on-one assessment and identifies the literacy and numeracy skills of a student at the beginning of kindergarten. And if a child has a disability, there will be accommodations made. So in 2023, next year, there will be some changes to items in both the literacy and numeracy components of the Best Start Kindergarten Assessment. And this will align with the new version of the syllabuses. Each session is about 20 minutes each. Normally schools will start kindergarten students a few days after the other students have started, and in those first few days, your child is booked in at a certain time to do that Best Start Assessment. It's usually the kindergarten teachers that do it, and it helps to get to know their child as well. Next slide, please. The idea is that it identifies the students' literacy and numeracy skills, and it's conducted in all New South Wales public schools since 2010, and it's linked up to the learning progressions. Now, importantly, it doesn't require students to prepare or study, so don't be concerned if your child can't answer all the questions. The Best Start Kindergarten Assessment provides the teachers with this information. Next slide, please. So the literacy tasks identify a range of skills such as word, sound, and letter recognition, early writing abilities, and ability to retell storylines from books that are read to them. And the numeracy tasks are related to early number concepts such as number recognition, counting, early addition and subtraction skills, and the ability to recognize repeating patterns. So things like when you're reading a book to your child, ask them questions about the story after you've read it, or talk about how something might be similar in the story to what's been happening in their real life. That helps with their comprehension. And again, when Alma was talking about in the kitchen with her children, do counting of things that are in the kitchen or around the house, or even if you're out and about, look at numbers on buses or on signs, those kind of things in the real life. So yeah, and I've managed to just squeeze that all in as quickly as I could. I hope I wasn't rushing too much.
That's fine. Thank you, both Katrina and Coralie as well. So,
Okay.
So far, Alma, Katrina, Coralie have shared really valuable information. And now we're going to hear from Sue from the Australian Independent School. So thank you, Sue. Sue, you just need to turn your mic on, please. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Zoom 101, I think. Okay, so hi everybody, and what an interesting set of speakers we've had so far, and lots of very valuable tips for preparing your child for school and also thinking about how systems work. I think there was a phrase that Coralie used about feeling confident and competent. And that's really what we're trying to encourage for all children. And there was a question in the chat about, do we, accommodating children, are we really building resilience, I think was what the question was getting at. But when we are making adjustments, if a child has an additional need, we're really trying to support them to be as independent as possible so that they feel confident in their school environment. So it's such an important thing to think about. But that was a really good question, whoever put that into the chat, and gives us all a lot of food for thought. So what I'm going to do is work out, where's my... Got it. I would like to acknowledge country as well. I'm speaking to you today from the land of the Budjalung people in northern New South Wales. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many lands of which we are meeting on today. And as we share our knowledge of teaching and learning, may I also pay respect to our elders, both past and present. It is their knowledge and experiences that hold the key to the success of future generations. So you are starting school. Isn't that a great face on that little guy? It's not just your child that's starting school, it's you as a family. And there's a lot to think about when we, especially if it's your first child that's starting school, there's a whole new world waiting for you. Whether it's the language of school where you need a glossary to actually understand the terms and the jargon, but even if it's not your first child, you will find that every experience is different. You'll know that in the independent sector, there is a wide range of schools, and each of those schools have their own approaches to transitioning and supporting all children into their schools and classrooms, and particularly those children who may have an additional need. Independent schools, like the department schools and Catholic schools, all follow the disability standards for education, and which really set out the guidelines for how schools go about approaching and supporting students who may have an additional need within their school. So the choice is there, and it's up to families. And one of the things that often is very strong in independent schools is the amount of parent involvement and involvement in a local community. Many independent schools were developed by local communities. So parents have been very strongly involved and are often involved at the board level in the governance area of the school. So when you choose your school, some of those factors may be playing and coming into, you may be taking into account when you make that choice. Transition processes vary very much from school to school. Some schools and most schools will be doing something in term 4 where they are really assisting children, all children come to school and get to know, so the teachers get to know the children and the children get to know the school and the routines. Sometimes if a child has an additional need, there will be additional visits arranged so that the child has more time to get to know what those routines and structures are within the school.
I found this on the web.
Sorry, that's my Siri talking. Just take that away. But it's also an important time for families because it really enables you to begin that important process of really developing relationships with school personnel. So there are things that you do need to share with your school. And particularly if your child has some additional needs, do be really open and honest and share all the relevant information that you may have. Your child may have had a very recent diagnosis or may not have a diagnosis, but you have some concerns. It's really important to share that because when a school has information about your child's level of need, they can put the very best supports in place to get to that success that we're looking for. So if your child has an additional need, we want schools really appreciate you sharing current reports from all the people who may be in your child's team. Your early intervention team, any psychologists, speech pathologists, doctors, your early childhood centre. They all have valuable information that schools can use to develop really appropriate plans and programs for your child. So why do we need that? If we get that breadth of information about your child, schools really can plan adjustments well, or in some sectors it's called accommodations. We tend to refer to them as adjustments. So adjustments can be anything from the child having their own hook outside the door of the kindy class, so they always know where to put their bag. It can be that they have a particular spot to sit on the mat, so that they always feel reassured that that's their place. So all these adjustments are quite important in ensuring that smooth transition for the student. And families have a really active role to play. It may seem daunting, especially if your child is starting at a big school, but you really need to find a way to have those strong relationships with the school so that you can be that active partner in the homeschool relationship. So it's about working really collaboratively and being really proactive. You can ask questions at any time, whether you're still choosing a school, whether you're about to start school, maybe the enrollment's already gone through, but there are still things that you're concerned about. Make appointments and sit down with the school team. They'll be more than happy to speak to you. You want to know, how can this school support my child well? How can I be involved in planning? Because you need to be in partnership around the plans that are developed for your child. Who else in the school is going to be involved in planning, and what are their roles within the school? And a really important one is, how do we communicate effectively? So what are the procedures? Is it a chat at the classroom door? Is it an email? Do I make a meeting once a fortnight? What will work for everybody in the partnership so that you feel reassured as a parent about how your child is going, but the school also knows that you are aware of their needs as well in the busyness of a school day. So make sure you set up those communication procedures. In the independent sector, one of the things that will be developed, in fact, in every sector, they'll all just look a little bit different. Your child will have an individual plan where we really do try and identify what the barriers are for them for their learning. And so when we make those adjustments, it's about eliminating or supporting the student to manage the barriers that they may face. It's easy to think about that if we think about a student who may have some physical needs that they can't manage steps and will need to have an adjustment made, which may look like a ramp, which everybody could use anyway. And many of the adjustments that are made, all students use. When I was looking at, Alma talked about social stories, the department showed those wonderful social stories that are available on their website. They're good for all children. And they've really come out of the sorts of adjustments that we've been making for students with additional needs for many years. So those things are very powerful in, again, ensuring that your child feels safe and comfortable in the routines and procedures of school life. When we think about preparing your child, and I know this has been said before, so I'll zip through it, providing visuals, pictures of the school building, going for a walk around the school building buildings when you can, attending the school fetes so that you get an idea of the school community as well. Colour can be important. You might colour code activities. So you might put on Tuesday, you might colour that in green in the timetable on the fridge because today is library day, and blue on Thursdays because that's sports day. You might even have a map of the school where you put some colour coding and a nice big circle around the student's classroom. And it's also important to think about your routines at home. Often things can fall apart because of the rush and busyness of suddenly getting into the routine of school. So do have a visual routine, a visual schedule. Whether your child has an additional need or not, this is really helpful that you've got that little visual schedule of what happens in the morning to get ready for school and what happens once I do get home from school. having those daily checklists, as Alma talked about, having that checklist, and Coralie about what goes in your school bag. One thing I think is important is to plan for some downtime when your child gets home. Try not to fill up the week with too many after-school activities when they first start school. It's such a busy time and children are exhausted. They've gone from an environment where they may have had maybe 30, maybe 50 children in a childcare centre or early childhood setting, and suddenly they're with hundreds. So there's a lot to take in. There's a lot of different people within their environment, a lot of people giving them instructions, a lot of different teachers during the day. So there will be times when they really do need that downtime when they get home. And they can also, you may find that they have some meltdowns. Just plan that that's going to happen. Make sure that you've got activities that the child enjoys, maybe story time or puzzles, some quiet activities, just so that they can release some of that anxiety that may have built up during the day. And again, that consistent approach between home and school. I think it's always good to have a little profile that you prepare, and I've just called it All About Sally. So just no matter, again, whether your child has an additional need or not, something that really describes your child's interests, what they like to do, what they, things they like to talk about, books they really like to read. Those things are really helpful for a kindergarten teacher to know. And again, as Belinda spoke about at the very beginning, on the Reimagine website, there's this wonderful guide for parents on Ready, Set, School with some really excellent ideas and profiles and proformas and templates. That's one of the templates in it that guides you with the sort of things that you might want to talk to your school about with your child. NDIS, if you have a child who has an additional need, you may be receiving NDIS funds and you may have NDIS providers. And all schools are familiar with NDIS providers and their school. However, it's really important that there is strong collaboration between the NDIS provider and the school principal. We have to remember that the child is at school primarily for education, not therapy. And while that therapy service really complements what is happening at school, it has to be done at a time where it's not taking the child away from the important aspects of education and why they're there, which includes all the cooperative play, learning to be a team member, as well as critical literacy and numeracy. So the principal finally makes the final decision about whether or not the provider can perhaps come into the school. It also often depends on space. Schools can be very tight and there can be nowhere that's really appropriate for somebody to be seeing a student. The critical thing is that the provider needs to know that they've got to give information to the school about the strategies they are using that will be effective. I've seen some great providers who actually work in the classroom with the teacher and plan with the teacher a fine motor lesson so that all children are getting some benefit, but it's targeting a particular student within the class. So there's a lot, we can have some flexibility there, but do be mindful that, that education is the primary goal of schools. So things for you to think about and prepare for. So what is school? How is school different from preschool or childcare? And if you think back to your own school days, you'll realise there are some very big differences. The numbers that I spoke about, but even the routines. Often children have a lot more choice in preschool or childcare, whereas at school, there is a routine to follow and teachers will be giving children instructions about what they're going to be doing next. As a family, you may want to become familiar with the terminology used at school. And if you go on to the NESA website, which I'll try and put into the chat, there's some information there about curriculum. So there's the key learning areas. You can get a feel for what the curriculum might look like if you're interested. But schools themselves will also provide information about the numeracy programs at school or the literacy programs and what they're doing and what their approach is. Have a think about, what does a school day look like? Think about, what does independence look like at school? And I think we've, you know, all my colleagues have really given some very good and graphic examples of how important it is to be independent within the school environment. Think about your communication with the school and find out what to do if you're not happy with what's happening. The most important thing is that you communicate. And if you have those lines of communication open from the beginning, and you know how to communicate, you've developed a relationship, then when a hiccup comes or there's a bit of a blip, you know how to approach it. There's some of the organisations, again, Belinda showed you many of these earlier in the presentation. So there's certainly lots of great supports out there for families to get further information. So thank you. And if you have any other questions that you'd like to ask specifically, you can ring the Association of Independent Schools of New South Wales and speak to the Student Services team. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Sue. That was really fabulous. I want to thank all three, well, 4 presenters, but from the 3 school system, for sharing such really valuable information. And I am going to ask Rosemary to run the second poll for the evening, which is revisiting our question, because we really hope that the information provided tonight has helped build your confidence, your knowledge, your capacity in supporting your child on this journey. It does take a village to raise a child, and that came out quite strongly. We are all here working together. You are a key player, as is your child, but that sharing of communication is really important. And you being comfortable with the process is going to support your child to be comfortable with the process. And that's what we want, the child to overall be ready. By the looks of it, we've got an increase in the somewhat confident and especially in the confident. Still got a few not confident, that's okay. If there is anything that hasn't been answered or any other information you would like, we will be, after the webinar, during the next 2 weeks or so, we will be sharing contact details again. Some slides will be shared, some information will be shared. But Rosemary has also put in the services at early ed email in the chat, so you are welcome to forward any other questions that you may have to us. Rosemary, I believe you've also put the link for the feedback survey. I'm just going to close this. I'm also going to share with you a QR code, families. If you could take a moment to capture that QR code, that will also give you an opportunity to complete some feedback on this evening's webinar, because we really want to keep learning from yourselves to make sure we are providing what you need. And if there is suggestions for improvement, we want to be listening to that as well. Looking at the Q&A and the chat, it does look like all questions have been answered. So thank you to the panelists for doing that throughout the evening. And once again, for sharing your valuable time and knowledge with these families today. Thank you to the families for being here with us this evening. Thank you to Rosemary for co-hosting. And we wish you all the best of luck on this journey. Get excited. It's a really valuable time. Thank you, everyone.